chapter 16 called Maranatha Marinade. Um, this was one of the earliest songs that I like wrote and worked on. I'm pretty sure I like wrote some of the riffs for it like very early on, like recorded demos, using my iPhone and, like sent them to my mentor and all, and she thought it was cool. Uh, in my opinion, this is probably like the most effective song, maybe out of all of them. Um, I think it's the song that I enjoy the most, like the opening riff, the like ending riff, same thing. But when I wrote it, when I came up with it, really, I was like, wow, this sounds like Hum, which most of you probably have never heard of Hum. They had like kind of a one-hit wonder back in the mid '90s with this song called Stars, and it was like featured on an episode of Beavis and Butthead, and um, I remember growing up hearing it on alternative rock radio, and like it was just a badass song, like even now. But um, that particular album, like it's decent, but the one they released after that's like masterpiece level. Um, like I really love that album, and it's one of those like I mean, I guess, get kind of lumped into the alternative post grunge kind of, you know, mid to late '90s sound. But I don't know, I think they influenced a lot of like underground hardcore bands and stuff like that because they were just like super heavy, but still like really accessible. I mean, it was I don't know. I really enjoy them. So like hearing some of this song, I'm like, it just reminded me of them a lot, and I was like, yeah, this works. And like just some of the chord progressions and riffs, like I love it. Um, it has some more. I don't want to call it funk. Um, or anything like that because it's not exactly funk, but I don't know, it's just kind of funky and rhythmic to me, and just it's fun. Um, and then the like center section where it, you know, does this whole like tone change into, more like instead of like metal guitar riffs, it goes into more like hard rock sort of thing. And I'm just like screaming at the top of my lungs over, you know, that part. Um, yeah, that's like one of my favorite uh, sections on the entire album. And I think what makes it is like the guitar distortion tones like a little more trebly, and I mean maybe I would change that to kind of match the lower end of like my metal distortion, but it's still just I don't know, I like it a lot, like it sounds cool. Just these like fat riffs. But yeah, what really hits that home for me, like every time I listen to that center section, I just want to get up and move, and it's the bass. Um, like now I play a 6 string bass, and I have everything like detuned to match, my guitar tunings. So, you know, like now you know, my bass would be like tuned to A or something like that, for this album mainly. Because I did like most of the songs in drop A tuning. And when I say like most, I think the only one that was in a G tuning was actually chapter 15, Yesterday's, which I had forgotten until like 2 months ago, that it was in a G tuning, because I had re-recorded the bass for that song like a few months ago, or I think like back in early December, if I remember correctly. Like I just the bass wasn't matching up with the drums as much, and it was really bugging me. So I was um, went back and just quickly re-recorded the bass for that song, and I was like, this doesn't sound right. And then it like hit me, oh, this is in a lower tuning than, like A tuning. So um yeah, like the anyway, back to the topic. Just the bass, like it hits that low note, like the essentially like the sixth string on my bass, and it's just like super low but super heavy yet super clean at the same time, because I don't think I was using any like distortion models on that like particular bass line. And it just, I don't know, it hits in a way that I love it. Like it, yeah, just kind of tone wise, like it kind of makes me want to geek out a little bit. And like recognize now that a lot of these songs are kind of like a time capsule from, a few years ago, because, like in the last few years since I recorded, these guitar lines, my setup has changed, not like drastically, but I have like added some like better distortion pedals essentially. Um, like uh, late last year, I went and bought like a much, much better distortion pedal that, it was a hefty buck to buy it, but like I'll be playing with that pretty much the rest of my life. Um, like for my metal distortion, pretty much on the entire album, I was using the Metal Muff, um, which is it's a great distortion pedal if you want something that's more of a fuzz. Um, and listening to like some of the early demos or like early versions of some of the tracks where I wasn't processing the guitars, like it's just way too fuzzy for the kind of tone that I want. And so like having to use like Guitar Rig to kind of doctor up um, guitar tone to, sound less like a fuzz and more like a actual distortion, it kind of bugs me now. Like if I could, re-record some of these guitar tones now, it would sound a lot cleaner and crisper and just as heavy, if not heavier. Um, but I mean, like I said, it's a time capsule, so you know, I just have to accept it for what it is. But pretty much everything about this song, I think it just nails just exactly what I was aiming for. Um, and then like even the vocals on it, like I'm always gonna hate the sound of my own voice. But like I might not have the best singing voice out there, but I'm probably far from the worst too. And yet, like this song, I could probably improve on some of the vocals, but I think like at least my clean singing in this song, like gets everything across the way I want it to. But like my screams on this song, like it's like I don't know, like tapped into, something deep in here that I don't think I got on a lot of the other songs. And I do think there's some emotional reason why to that, which I'll get into later. But um yeah, just the especially like that center section, like when I was like screaming my head off, and it's still like just it sounds good to me. So like yeah, overall like musically I'm really happy with this song, and is why I chose it to basically be the single on Bandcamp. But so like the literal meaning of this song, um it's kind of hard to say because it's I don't think it's like pushing the story forward into new territory, if that makes sense. Like he's still dealing with abuse and being in prison, um, and just yeah, like overall like physical, emotional kind of torture and abuse. But I guess like he's kind of turned inward and kind of like asked himself why like things are the way they are, and kind of drawing certain conclusions. So uh one of the things that he talks about, the protagonist at the beginning, is how she, meaning Aurora once again, and by default kind of talking about, you know, the church, um and she was, birthed with the power to dispel any enemy agent. Um, but it says, but she fears death that none avenge, thus enemies' heels press to my throat. Um, so it's my view of how, like, the church, in so many ways, is supposed to have this power to be able to be more than conquerors, to be able to stand up against any devilish, satanic, whatever attack that could come against it. And yet, in fearing death, she does nothing. And it's his recognition that Aurora has that power, but she won't do anything to help him get out of prison or whatnot. Um, and so like in in talking about these villagers and soldiers, police force, whatever, who have come against him and imprisoned him, he realizes that they have, like the scriptures talk about in the Old Testament, especially, faith in chariots and horses. They curse with great divorces, another C.S. Lewis reference there. Um, and so, he says, like, my God, do you perceive the murder on their tongues? Um, and so then um, there's a section that I start singing slash screaming, and it kind of goes back and, like internal rhyme scheme. And once again, uh, John Mess from Dance Gavin Dance, sort of, his influence on me with, certain rhyme schemes and patterns that he uses, but also, I guess, um, like influence from hip hop cadence, um, and rhyme patterns. But he says it said I'm quixotic, which I don't know. I can't remember if it's actually pronounced quixotic or quixotic. I'm not sure, but even so, even if I mispronounce it as quixotic like I do in the song, it would fit, the kind of rhyme scheme going on there. Um, but that's uh, an adjective. Uh, I guess describing, Don Quixote, and personal meaning. It's like I recognized at the time that there were probably people out there who figured that I was trying to charge windmills, so to speak, and that, whatever misplaced idea of chivalry or honor that, I had was just basically the same as kind of a Don Quixote kind of character. Um, and so yeah, that whole like section was really dealing with like my personal struggles with how like other people view me when it comes to certain things of faith, or just like standing up for myself in general, or doubling down on things that I believe in. And it's one of those things, once again, that it almost seems like I was writing this stuff prophetically for myself or something. Because like I've said a ton of times already, I wrote these lyrics basically over like a month and a half span, in late 2016. But like a year after writing them, it's like, crap, I'm dealing with exactly this kind of quixotic kind of stuff that I referred to, because by that point, like when I wrote this, a lot of my Christian friends were still like standing with me, believing with me and in me. And then, like a year later, it seemed like all that stuff was being brought into question. And like even some of my closest friends, like, quite frankly, thought I was full of shit. And like, I'm not going to pretend like it didn't hurt, but it really felt like in the course of a year, I went from like having all these allies on my side to like, okay, now it's just me. Like, I'm still here, I'm still, believing what I'm believing, still standing for what, I believe to be true. But nobody else seems to give a damn about that, and they have questioned me and, thought I'm full of shit, which I recognized even at the time that, they had every right to do so. But, it is disheartening when you find yourself like really standing alone and kind of suffering for it. Um, I don't know, that just that's what I was dealing with, um, at the time. And even up to the point of like when I wrote these lyrics, I dealt with that in ways in the past, and even kind of felt that way at that present moment of writing it, to a much lesser degree. But I guess that's the point, was that, you know, year later, it was like, yeah, this really does kind of resonate with me in a way that only makes the meaning or like the personal meaning of it mean that much more and more concrete, at least to me personally. Um, so I guess a lot of it in some ways is once again kind of reflective of something you would find in the Psalms of just like dealing with hard situations, dealing with suffering, dealing with realizing that stuff has come against you, and it's essentially like listing that stuff out poetically and just kind of, I mean, praying like, God, you do something about this, um, avenge me or whatever. Not that I want like vengeance or anything like that, but I guess the more appropriate um, way of looking at it is, like show that I'm not full of shit, essentially. And so like one of the things that I scream, and hence where like the title kind of comes in, is "Come, O Lord," or "The Lord has come," and that is essentially the meaning of the word Maranatha, which is like old Hebrew term meaning just that. And like among uh, scholars, does it mean "Come, O Lord," or does it mean that the Lord has already come? And like my point was that like either way, it makes no difference when God is needed in the present moment. Like, yeah, when there is need for peace, and when you feel surrounded by warmongers, um, stuff like that. And says they'd feed your bride a martyr's meat, soaked in teriyaki praises, mock faith and hope, and replaced with falsehood and despair. Um, and like right before that, is um, reference to like cannibals and wanting, hungering for post-apocalyptic flesh. Um, and I mean, I've seen so many, post-apocalyptic movies or books, comics, or whatever, that that was kind of the imagery that I wanted to draw from, um, and that like these enemies, if you will, which you know it doesn't represent anyone in particular in my life. Like I couldn't really see it that way. It's just when you feel like everything is wrong in your life and you can't really point like one person out or anything, and it's just kind of like a way to personify the like situations or like the devil or like the perception of evil to begin with, of just like seeing them as like some sort of like post-apocalyptic sort of person, yeah, just personifying something like that. And I use the phrase "an appetite for Maranatha marinade," and it's, I don't know, just kind of a play on words. I'm pretty sure Maranatha marinade was where this song started, with the lyrics of just like just those two words kind of coming together, and it's like, well, I like the sound of that. And so, what can I do with it? Center a song around this concept, which, for me is just going back to, the line about like teriyaki praises and feed her a martyr's meat and stuff like that, of just this idea um, that these enemies in this song want to take, you know, the righteous, take Aurora, take the protagonist himself, and just like make food out of them, like yeah, like cannibalism sort of thing. So that was like the meaning of that phrase. Um, so okay, now when I don't know how it is for other vocalists out there, um, but I know when we listen to music, we're looking for something that has, emotional value to it. Like we want to hear the emotion in the vocalist delivery, like on not just like in a live setting, but when you pop in your favorite album, you don't want something that's just dry and doesn't have any like emotional tone, just stoic or whatever you have you. Um, you want something that has authenticity to the like vocal delivery. Um, and so like writing these lyrics and all, there is a amount of emotion that goes into it. But at the same time, I guess I've, because of writing so much and over the years, um, I'm able to come up with emotional lyrics or emotional words. But like in the moment that I'm writing them, it's less emotional and it's about like playing in the sandbox, but the sand being, language, words, and intended meanings and stuff like that. And so, having this like poetry background that I do, um, I, I I come at it more logically, I suppose. Um, and likewise, in recording, it's about getting the best take. And that means that maybe there's a certain amount of emotion that comes in the vocal delivery, but in the actual moment of singing or screaming the vocals, excuse me, it's not very emotional at all, um, for the most part. It's more about like pushing, especially in like screams and all, like pushing volume and grit and sound to its like peak limit without breaking, if that makes sense. um, to get the best tone out of the voice itself, um, and hopefully like with the best cadences if possible, which is much harder, doing growls or screams, because it's like you're compressing and distorting the vocal cords essentially. Um, so it's about like the sound itself instead of just raw emotion coming out. Um, and just, oh, that take sucked, or I messed up halfway through it, so you throw that take out and re-record it until you're like, okay, that sounds halfway decent enough. Let's move on from here. So it really isn't that much of an emotional process at all. But there were two sections on this album that I can think of that just the raw emotion just overcame me. And one of them was in this song. So what happened was, um, I think I had a session one night, did some recording by myself, and like, you know, inside, information, like I have a job. I'm pretty much alone the entire time. So like between my duties, I'm able to work on other stuff, um, which is, quite a bit amount of time between having to fulfill my duties. And it's like, I guess almost expected because, I mean, I can't just sit there twiddling my thumbs the entire time through, my shift. So, I would do vocal takes in some empty space since, like, I'm literally the only person in the entire facility. Um, and so I think maybe with this exact song, there was some demoing going on in the facility at the time. And so, like, there was like an entire floor in the building that I had set up, like, on certain nights to do vocals. And it was like literally like rubble and dust and like broken walls and like metal framing just like all around me, and like it kind of depressing. And like later on in the recording process, um all that stuff was like finished, with the demoing, but then I've just got like this massive like 2,000 foot open floor to, just use as like recording space. And like it was good to just be able to like have all this space to like scream at the top of my lungs and not have to worry about like echo from a bedroom wall or anything like that. Um, so, like saying that this like demoed space kind of helped me to get like in this like mental zone. Um, but like one night I was having a lot of trouble working on some of the vocal, like the initial vocal takes of this particular song. And I didn't get finished with it. So after work, I came home that morning and set up for a couple of minutes, like basically in my kitchen. Um, and I started screaming, um, pretty much the section right after like the midsection uh, fades out and it gets back into like heavy kind of metal guitar riffs. And I scream the whole, they'd feed your bride a martyr's meat, teriyaki praises, yada yada. And so my voice was like completely fried by that point, and I was getting frustrated with it, and just like trying to push my voice and push my voice and push my voice. And then I got to this line that says, "The spoils of war have no meaning if I don't have you." And I freaking lost it. I remember I finished that line and my voice was fried and just hoarse, and it sounded like complete crap when I like listened to it afterwards. But when I finished that line, I just broke down in the middle of my kitchen sobbing. Like it just, the emotion overcame me. And technically, like I lowered it in the mix for those like couple of lines leading up to that point. But because of like me getting like super emotional about it, I was like, I have to keep this take in the song and basically do like a vocal doubling sort of thing um, for that like couple of lines because like that was real. Like I freaking cried like a baby because when I was recording that take, like everything with, you know, the girl that I wanted to marry was just at its worst. And, you know, my mentor was dead. Everything was just like I just hurt, you know, and screaming that line just in the context of everything else, just it hit me really hard. And so I kept, you know, a section of that take lower in the mix in the song because like it meant that much to me. And so that line in particular, is it who is the you in it, um you know, who is it directed towards? And my answer for that is I think there's multiple people in play, going back into the whole like different meanings and different levels of allegory and literal meaning. And so I think it means Jesus. I think it means the church. Um, you know, just this idea of community and, like I've said before, being part of something that's bigger than you and something that's universal. Um, you know, that meant something to me. But also, you know, straight up, it, you know, personally was like, you know, everything that's happened kind of has no meaning if I don't have, you know, this woman I want to marry in my life. And does that mean like, oh, I have to marry her or whatever? Well, I don't know. Maybe at the time when of screaming it, it's like, you know, this was like a faith declaration. This was, you know, something I was standing for and hoping for. Now, I mean, after everything that's happened over the last number of years, um, that's not the case now. But like at the time, like it just weighed so heavily on me that um, like it made me burst into tears. And it really did feel that way of, you know, just like so much of this would be kind of purposeless if I'm not connected to that, to her, to the church, to, you know, Jesus too. Um, so yeah, that whole section just, you know, was at least pretty powerful for me personally. Um, and it says, "My beloved, the only reason I still believe for earth to be as it is in heaven." Right after that, um, so I mean, that's another sort of faith declaration thing for me, is that, you know, why are you a Christian? Well, I mean, I have plenty of questions and things that I don't understand. But at the end of the day, I can't believe in some sort of nihilism. Like that definitely doesn't lead me anywhere or offer me any sense of hope. And if it's only a matter of like some sort of Sartre and I'm going to define morality myself, some sort of categorical imperative, if you will. Um, like I'm a fan of that sort of stuff, like when it comes to ethics and, you know, universal ethics and everything, but it only goes so far. Um, yeah, it only goes so far without having some sort of transcendent meaning to it all. And, having God, having a creator um, that attributes meaning and purpose to all of us, and that, life's joys and sufferings are for some greater purpose than we can fathom. You know, that's just pretty much what I'm talking about in this song, and not just, oh, like I've said before, that it's about some mansion in heaven, but it's um, about seeing the kingdom also here on earth. So that's that's pretty much what this song is about, and ending with the phrase "My God is my all, even if I perish today," and that kind of leads into the next song and what's going on there. But recognizing again mortality, but like in a different sort of way, of not like, oh, it's going to be some like long distant thing like it was in mausoleums, but recognizing that, like, because of the position that he's in with his suffering, that like his mortality may actually be much closer than he'd like to think it would. But even despite that, that God is still his all. And I mean, yeah, literally at that time, I wasn't dealing with, oh, I may die because of all this stuff. This is just hyperbole and using figurative language um, to, you know, make these kind of descriptions or allegories or whatever. But, for me at that time, especially of my life, like it still felt like the situations I was facing were pretty dire. And even just screaming that last line was just like, even if everything just goes to hell in a handbasket, as we would say in the South, um, you know, God has to be my all, you know, despite those, negative things and negative feelings and the suffering, that like he has to be my focus and my redeemer. And so yeah, that's what this song is 100% about.